So thank you, Hannah, for organizing this, and thank you for asking me to coordinate this session. We have three presentations in this session that are technical in nature, but I think of a lot of interest for economists, because they focus on how technology works in a way that affects either the security of blockchains and the way that that security can be compromised by either random loss of the keys or different schemes to preserve the keys, and this is kind of interesting in terms of putting together an organizational infrastructure, perhaps, that ensures the security of access to the blockchain. And then we have two more papers that address incentive schemes to basically provide either secure computation, which means computation where we want to get a result, but without losing or without giving away the private information that every participant has. And a paper that also explores incentive-based computation using spam as an example. So what I would like to do is I would like to have the papers presented, and then I will kind of summarize and open for Q&A. So let's lead with that. The first paper is by Itai Eyal, and he has provided us actually with a video that I'm sharing, but he is available and he's lively present. He's present live. So with that said, take it away, Itai.
Wallets securing digital assets rely on users securing secrets, typically cryptographic signing keys. This work addresses, for the first time as far as I know, the relation between fault probabilities of the keys and the failure probability of the wallet as a whole. Now, there is a wide variety of decentralized systems, starting from systems for transacting money, starting from Bitcoin and Zcash, decentralized finance platforms like Ethereum that enable an extensive system of decentralized finance applications. In particular, non-fungible tokens. These are digital assets that are maintained in a decentralized system, a blockchain. And finally, central bank digital currencies. These are currencies like euro or dollar or shekel that banks look to implement in a digital way, but with decentralized elements. And the security of all these systems starts from the security of the wallets of the individuals, how they secure their funds. So what I'm going to talk about is relevant for individuals storing their personal funds, to companies managing larger amounts, to asset management corporations in charge of the funds and digital assets of many, many users. Now, in decentralized systems, users send orders or transactions to a blockchain, and there is no central party that manages the authentications. The user chooses their authentication mechanism by defining it and sending it over to the blockchain, and the blockchain subsequently enforces the authentication mechanism. The orders that the users send and the authentication mechanism itself are visible to everyone. This is how decentralized systems work. And the authentication typically uses cryptographic signatures. So the users supply a signature with a secret key, where the matching public key is on the blockchain, and this validates that they have the secret key. So the users must maintain these secrets, and we'll call them keys in general, even though they may be portions of the keys, etc. Previous work addressed the question of how to secure an individual key. You can commit it to memory, put it on a piece of paper, use a dedicated hardware token to store it. There has even been work on how to use multiple keys and design so-called K out of N wallets, where any subset of k keys out of a total of n keys can be used to authenticate, including with threshold signatures. And there has been questions of analysis of how to design keys where different keys suffer different faults. But to the best of my knowledge, even though these works circle around this question, no previous work has addressed the question of how to actually design the wallet given a set of keys, or how many keys we should actually use. So the first thing we need to do is, of course, define a model, and we'll use today a fairly simple model, which very quickly leads to interesting results, as we'll see. So we have two principles, an owner and an attacker. The wallet is the authentication scheme. We'll use the two terms interchangeably. The owner authenticates with keys that he's trying to maintain, and the attacker wishes to authenticate in place of the owner. Keys can be safe, which means only the owner has access to the key. But keys can also suffer three types of faults. So a key can be lost, meaning no one has access, not the owner, not the attacker. They can be leaked, meaning the owner still has access, but the attacker also has access to the key. And they can be stolen. In case of theft, the attacker has access to the key and the owner does not. Some examples, three-part threshold signatures, we'll consider it as three different keys. A password can be lost if it's forgotten, or it can be leaked, for example, if it is guessed, also with keyboard logging. A pin-secured hardware token can be lost, and then it's lost, or it can be stolen if the attacker manages to do two things, both steal the hardware and guess the pin. That's the event of stolen. Otherwise, it's just lost. Now, we'll have keys denoted 1 to n, and the state of each key, I, is going to denote it ki, and it's either safe, lost, leaked, or stolen. A scenario is the state vector of all n keys. So at sigma I, we have the state of key I. And from the scenario, we can deduce the availability of the keys to the owner and to the attacker. So sigma IO is the availability for the owner of key I, and sigma IA is the availability of key I to the attacker. The options are here. If it's safe, both of them are true. If it's stolen, the owner's vector entry is false and the attacker's vector entry is true, and so on. Now, the keys have independent fault probabilities in this work, and their state probabilities are going to be denoted PI safe, PI loss, and so on. Sometimes we'll use the same probability for all keys, and then we omit the subscript. This means that for each scenario, we have a probability for that scenario taking place, and the probability of the scenario is going to be the product of the key probabilities because they're independent. So for n keys, we have 4 to the n possible scenarios listed in the table here. The first 5. Next, a wallet, W, is a predicate on n variables. Right? It needs the availability of each of the keys. If you have enough keys available, the wallet is able to authenticate you. So, for example, a wallet can require either both K1 and K2 or both K2 and K3. This is the wallet shown on the screen now. And a wallet is successful in a scenario sigma if the owner can satisfy it, but the adversary cannot satisfy it. So W of sigma O and not W of sigma A. And the probability of failure is the probability of an unsuccessful scenario. That's the probability of the failure of the wallet, and this is going to be the metric we aim to reduce. Now, how can we do this? First option is to just do an exhaustive search, look for all possible wallets. We scan the entire range. Now, a wallet is actually simply a monotone Boolean function. Adding availability of the key can only help you authenticate, not the other way around. Which means that the number of keys known as the Dedekind number, -2, because the Dedekind number also includes the Boolean functions true and false, and this number grows very quickly. We don't even know its value beyond 8, and it's not tractable for large n. This is for 3 keys. We have already 18 possibilities. So we'll have to go with heuristics, and we use an evolutionary approximation. We start with a random population of wallets, just generate so many random wallets, and then we produce a new population from the original population. We take n selection wallets uniformly at random from the original population. We choose the best one in this selection. We perturb it. We randomly, the wallet is comprised of combinations, and we OR them all. It's a CNF. And so for each component we perturb, we randomly flip whether we want to add or to remove a key from the combination. The result is a perturbed wallet, and we add this to the next generation. We do this until we have enough wallets for a new generation, and then we start over. And we repeat this process until the best wallet in a generation stabilizes. We can't improve any further. So for so many rounds. Now let's talk about concrete cases for optimal wallets, and we'll start with very tractable examples, actually first with just one key. With just one key, the only possible wallet is, of course, just using that key. The wallet just requires the key. And we see that what happens to the failure probability. So we take a wallet with a theft probability of 1%, a leakage probability that goes from 0 to 1, and the theft and the loss probability that goes from 0 to 1, actually to 0.99. And for each point, each point in this graph is actually loss, leak, and theft concrete value, and we can calculate the failure probability of the wallet. And this is what you see. More darker green means lower failure probability. Obviously, the optimum is at the origin. Now, if we look at 2 keys, things become more interesting. Now we have 2 options. We can use the AND of both keys or the OR of both keys. And you see the results at the bottom here. Naturally, the AND is better when leak is more likely because it makes things harder for the attacker. And on the other end, an OR is favorable when loss is more likely because it makes things easier for the owner. Now we move to ask what is the best wallet for 2 keys. And surprisingly, perhaps, we find that this is at the most significant range, not the AND or the OR, but actually using just a single key. We take again a theft probability of 1%, and we see that there is a range in the middle where the leak and loss probability are roughly the same, where the best key is just choosing one of the keys and using just that one. If we increase the theft probability, then this range grows. And importantly, the most important portion of this graph is close to the origin because we are using keys that have a low failure probability, meaning that in the relevant range, it's quite possible that the best wallet with 2 keys is actually just a single one. Moving on to 3 keys, now with no theft, so theft probability of 0, we see that, again, when there is mostly loss or there is mostly leak, then the best wallets are the OR wallet, OR of all keys, or the AND wallet, AND of all keys, respectively. But in the middle, we see that the best wallet is the set of any pair of keys. And even if we increase the theft probability, this remains the best key, the best wallet, particularly in the area of interest around the origin. This is actually good news because this is heuristic best practice used in various contexts. I'm just briefly going to mention that for 4 keys, the story becomes interesting because with 4 keys we have 2 options for k out of n, right? We could use 3 out of 4 or 2 out of 4. And we see that pairs are better when loss is more likely, making things easier for the owner. And triads are better when leaks are more likely, making things harder for the attacker. If we increase theft probability, things become even more interesting, but I would like to talk about something else, which is how many keys one should use. And here you see the evolutionary algorithm in black, our optimal guess at green, which is just trying all the k out of n options, and the optimal wallet when we can calculate it. The number of keys goes from 1 to 7, and the wallet failure probability on the logarithmic axis on the y. First, when there is only loss or there is only leak, then the failure probability drops exponentially with the number of keys. This is perhaps not surprising. But when there is only theft, we see that there is this step function. There is no improvement when we move from an odd to an even number. This matches what we saw earlier. You see here that the evolutionary algorithm is able to get close to the optimum, but doesn't always reach it. Now, the question we asked ourselves following this is how many keys should we actually store? And we find that if we have a theft probability of 1% and no leak but loss goes from 1 to 3%, we see in the circles here that actually having 6 keys with only 3% loss is better, an order of magnitude, better than having 3 keys with just 1% loss. So one should ask themselves whether they should use more keys but weaker keys or a smaller number of better protected keys. The answer is not obvious and depends on the parameters. Two final things I would like to mention. One, this is within heterogeneous keys, so not all of them now have the same probabilities. The first one can only be stolen with 1%, and the others can only be lost with 1%. And we see that the symmetric and guesses are actually not the optimal. The evolutionary algorithm is doing better, and it's roughly an exponential improvement. And finally, this is what happens when we have keys of different types. I'm not going to go through this in the interest of time, but this just shows you that the optimal wallet really changed them. The best choice for the third key given the particular first 2 keys is different depending on the probabilities of the first 2 keys. You might prefer this kind of key or that kind of key, given the specific keys that you have. If you want to play around with this, then we have a wallet designer app for you. It's open sourced and you can use it at walletdesign.dev. This was created by Shalev Karen from Zengo, and it allows you to choose the fault probabilities of your keys and get the failure probability of a wallet of your choice. It will even calculate the optimal wallet for you, up to 4 keys. It all runs on client side for obvious reasons. So in conclusion, we presented a novel modeling of cryptocurrency wallet security. We talked about keys, scenarios, probabilities, and the authentication scheme or the wallet. We showed that exhaustive search is possible for small wallets, and then you have to switch to the evolutionary approximation that does quite well. We saw some surprising optimal wallets for various regions, but generally saw exponential improvement with the number of keys, which means you have to ask yourselves quantity or quality. The answer is not always the same. There are various questions arising from this. 2 natural next steps are what happens when the probabilities are dependent, and can we do something better than a heuristic evolutionary algorithm when the number of keys grows? If you're interested, I would love to talk about any and all of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Tai. In the crypto world, we are our private keys, so it is very important to understand how to optimize the security of these. And now let me turn it over to Sanaz, who will share his recording, but he will be available to answer questions on the chat and then in the breakout rooms afterwards. So Sanaz, take it away.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me? Okay, perfect. How about my screen? Is it visible?
Yes, I can see that.
Us. Hello everyone, I'm Sonas, a protocol engineer at VAC team from Status Research and Development. Today I'm going to present Vaku Relay, which is a privacy-preserving peer-to-peer economic spam protection that is suitable for private and anonymous messaging system. The link to the paper is also provided below. I'll start the presentation by explaining Vaku 2 and Vaku 2 Relay. I will review the spam issue and the related study. Then I will explain Vaku Relay, the architecture, and also how it excels its counterparts. Vaku 2 is a stack of peer-to-peer protocols that enable anonymous and privacy-preserving communication. The protocols are designed to be able to run in resource-restricted environments. Vaku 2 contains multiple protocols, but the focus of today's talk would be Vaku Relay and Vaku Relay, which are the transport layers of Vaku. Let me start by Vaku 2 Relay Transport Protocol. It follows a publisher-subscriber messaging model. That is, peers gather around topics that they are interested in and can send messages to the topic or receive messages within that topic. Here is an example illustration of a mesh of peers subscribed to the same topic. Note that it doesn't match reality, it's just an example. Vaku Relay implements Gossip Subrouting Protocol and is a minor extension of libp2p Gossip Sub Protocol. At a high level, peers route messages by sending them to a subset of their connections. In this example, peer A, as the message owner, forwards its message to a subset of neighbors, and the neighbors proceed similarly till the message reaches the entire mesh. Vaku Relay is also an anonymous transport where there is no personally identifiable information like IP address or peer ID attached to the protocol messages. Therefore, it's not feasible to identify the origin of a message. Vaku Relay, as an open peer-to-peer transport protocol, can be exploited by spammers. We define spammers to be entities that publish a large number of messages in a short amount of time, and so they cause denial of service attack. With that definition, spammers can be controlled if we can control their messaging rate. But there is a big issue, and the problem is that messages are anonymous. Therefore, routing peers will just observe a surge of messages coming in without knowing who has published them. Therefore, spam messages are indistinguishable from the non-spam ones. And considering this, solutions like IP blocking would not be effective. The state-of-the-art peer-to-peer spam protection techniques are proof of work, which is deployed by Whisper, and peer scoring method adopted by libp2p. The proof of work is not computationally efficient and also does not fit resource-limited devices. On the other side, peer scoring is a local solution because each peer monitors and scores its direct connections and drops the connections with low scores. However, a spammer would be still able to continue its activity by switching its connections from one peer to another as soon as the score drops the threshold. In addition to that, there are inexpensive attacks where the spammer can deploy millions of bots to send bulk messages. The good news is that in Vaku Relay, we cope with the aforementioned issues and we take the Vaku Relay protocol as an anonymous transport protocol and we combine it with the rate limiting nullifier construct to control the messaging rate. The end result has a peer-to-peer structure with no central entity involved. It allows global identification and removal of spammers. It is privacy preserving because user anonymity is respected, and it has economic incentives because there is a financial punishment for the spammers and a financial reward for those who catch spammers. Let's begin with the Arlen construct. It allows a set of users to broadcast arbitrary signals, where signal can be any arbitrary value like a string or vote, while proving they are among a group of authorized users without disclosing their identities. The idea is that each user can only send M messages for a specific external nullifier. An external nullifier can be seen as a voting booth where each user can only cast one vote. For the rest of this presentation, I'm going to consider the messaging rate to be 1. Arlen primitive consists of a Merkle tree that represents a group of authorized users. Each user has a public key registered in the tree, and the corresponding secret key is only known to the user. For signaling part or publishing a message, the user specifies an external nullifier, as you can see here, together with an internal nullifier, which is derived from the secret key and external nullifier, and as you can see in the slide. And together, the user also discloses a share of its secret key by using Shamir secret sharing scheme. This share will be used to remove the user from the group in the case of double signaling. For those who might not be familiar with the Shamir secret sharing scheme, the high-level idea is that it's a technique that allows to split a secret data into n pieces, and it's also possible to reconstruct the secret back by having a subset of t shares available. And for this presentation, t is going to be 2, the threshold, I mean. Finally, the user proves in zero-knowledge manner that it's a part of the group, and also it has computed the secret share and also the internal nullifier and also external nullifier correctly. And in a nutshell, the zero-knowledge proof system that is used is zero-knowledge snark, and it stands for zero-knowledge succinct and interactive argument of knowledge. And at a high level, it's a cryptographic proof that allows one party to prove the possession of certain information to a verifier without revealing that information. In Arlen construct, users cannot violate the messaging rate. Why? Because if a user publishes more than one message for the same external nullifier, it will end up having 2 messages with the same external and internal nullifier, as you can see in the slide. And so by just checking the nullifiers part, we can spot the double messaging action. Moreover, by sending 2 messages, by violating the messaging rate, the user will disclose 2 shares of its secret key, 1 per each message, and then using which the corresponding secret key can be reconstructed, and the user gets removed from the tree, therefore it can no longer use that secret key for messaging. Now let's see the end-to-end integration of Arlen into Voku relay to achieve spam protection. Here, the Arlen group consists of the peers that belong to the same gossip sublayer, meaning that they are subscribed to the same topic. Each user has a public key, and the list of public keys is stored on a contract that is deployed on the Ethereum blockchain. A peer willing to publish a message should register its public key to the contract, and for that it sends a transaction to the contract that contains the public key and also some amount of ether. And this deposit, the ether deposit, is going to be used to prevent spam activity. Registration is a one-time action, so each peer registers only once. Peers construct the Merkle tree, the membership Merkle tree, locally, and they also listen to the registration and deletion events that are emitted from the contract in order to update their local trees. For the external nullifier, we denote it by epoch, and we define it to be the number of t seconds, where t is a system design parameter, that elapsed since the Unix epoch. Peers are allowed to publish only one message per epoch without being slashed. Each peer locally keeps track of the current epoch, and for the message publishing, it's going to be the same as the Erlang framework. The message owner attaches the nullifier part, both the epoch and the internal nullifier, together with the share of its secret key and the zero knowledge proof part to the message, and sends it to the network. A routing peer follows the regular routing protocol of Waku relay, the gossip subprotocol, and in addition does the verification steps of the Erlang construct, meaning that it verifies the proof part and also verifies the epoch to see whether it has a huge gap with its own captured epoch or not, and also checks the nullifiers to see whether double signaling has happened or not. And if all the checks pass, the routing peer relays the message. And also persists a record of the nullifiers and also the secret share of the message, because it's going to be used to capture double signaling for the future incoming messages. But what if the routing peer finds out that the messaging rate is violated, which means that there has been an old message whose nullifiers match the new message? In that case, the routing peer can reconstruct the secret key of the spammer and then sends a transaction to the contract and removes the spammer public key from the group, and also gets its reward by withdrawing the spammer's deposit from the contract. This brings us to the end of the presentation. We talked about Waku Erlang Relay, how the end-to-end interaction works, and how it enables global spam removal using the Erlang primitive on top of Waku Relay, and how it brings together anonymity and incentivizes spam prevention in a peer-to-peer messaging system. In the end, I would like to shed light on our future plan. Benchmarking is the first on the roadmap. The next is to address a storage overhead regarding the maintenance of the full Merkle tree. We are also looking into an off-chain slashing solution, because currently on-chain slashing is subject to delay because the transaction has to be mined. And so with an off-chain method, peers can communicate the slash public keys in a peer-to-peer manner so they can enjoy a real-time spam protection. The other direction to pursue is to provide a cost-effective way of member insertion and deletion using layer 2 solution. The reason is that currently these operations cost almost 40k gas, which translates to $15 US, which might not be affordable by all the users. So an alternative solution is worth investigation. And finally, there are some references for those who are interested to read further. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Sanaz. As technologies like blockchains are becoming more used, especially in business settings, one of the concerns that we always have is that some participants either accidentally or maliciously will flood the system with messages, and then approaches like yours help us put in place mechanisms to control that. The next paper is by Takeshi, and it is on secure computation with non-equivalent penalties. Takeshi, go ahead.
Can you hear me? Thank you.
Yes, we can see you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I am Takeshi Nakai from the University of Electro Communications in Japan. Sorry. In this presentation, I'd like to talk about secure computation with non-equivalent penalties in constant rounds. This is a joint work with Kazumasa Shinagawa. This is the outline of this talk. In my presentation, I deal with an open problem in secure computation with penalties. So I will talk about what is secure computation with penalties and introduce the open problem. After that, I will explain the prior work that our proposed protocol is based on. Finally, I will introduce a new model called secure computation with no-equivalent penalties and propose a protocol to give a solution to the open problem. First, I will talk about backgrounds. Secure computation is a cryptographic technology that enables to compute a function while keeping input data secret. For example, each party input a secret data A, B, and C. As a result of secure computation, all parties obtain a desired function F's output, while each input value is kept secret from the other parties. Fairness is one of the security properties in secure computation. It requires that at the end of protocol, either all parties learn the output or nobody learns it. However, it is well known that fairness cannot be achieved if more than half parties are corrupted. On the other hand, in order to overcome the impossibility result, there are works to achieve fairness by imposing monetary penalties on avoiding parties. It is known that such a functionality can be realized by using Bitcoin. Secure computation using monetary penalties was formalized as secure computation with penalties. Secure computation with penalties requires two conditions. First one is no honest party loses money, and second one is if an adversary learns an output, but an honest party does not, then the honest party gets money as a compensation. This is the summary of prior works in Bitcoin-based protocols for secure computation with penalties. N is the number of parties. In this work, we evaluate protocols with the number of rounds and the number of broadcasts. The number of broadcasts corresponds to the number of transactions in Bitcoin. Bentov and Kumarsan achieved secure computation with penalties with ON rounds and ON broadcasts. After that, Kumarsan and Bentov proposed a constant round protocol. However, this protocol requires ON squared broadcasts. So, they posed an open problem. Is it possible to design secure computation with penalties that needs only constant rounds and ON broadcasts? In this work, we present a possible answer to this question in a slightly relaxed setting. The relaxed setting is called secure computation with no equivalent penalties. We propose a protocol with constant rounds and ON broadcasts in this model. I will talk about what is secure computation with no equivalent penalties later. Next, I will introduce Bentov and Kumarsan's protocol for secure computation with penalties. Our proposed protocol is constructed based on Bentov and Kumarsan's work, so I introduce an overview of their protocol. This is the overview of Bentov and Kumarsan's protocol. Their protocol consists of two phases. The first phase is the constant round MPC phase based on oblivious transfer. In this phase, each party obtains secret shares of the desired function's output. In addition to the secret shares, each party gets commitments of the shares. The commitments are used to verify the share's validity when parties reconstruct the secret value. We note that this phase is the standard computation without using Bitcoin. The second phase is a fair reconstruction. which is the key phase for achieving fairness. In this phase, every party reveals the share created in the first phase. Then, if an adversary steals the reconstruction result without revealing the share, then the adversary is imposed a monetary penalty. Namely, this is the main phase for achieving secure computation with penalties. Bentov and Kumar-san proposed a fair reconstruction protocol with ON rounds by introducing the crucial functionality called claim or refund functionality. In the claim or refund functionality, a sender can send money with a condition. The condition consists of a witness and a round number. In order to receive the money, the receiver must reveal the specified witness in the specified round. If the receiver does not reveal the witness in the round, then the receiver cannot get the money and the sender can get back it. This functionality can be implemented in Bitcoin with a constant number of broadcasts. Before presenting Bentov and Kumar-san's protocol, I showed the Naïve approach in the two-party setting to explain the idea of the fair reconstruction. Suppose that the fair reconstruction is constructed with the two claim or refund functionalities like this. Recall that this transaction means P2 can receive Q dollars only if he reveals T2 in round 2. This approach seems to achieve fair reconstruction because a party who does not reveal the share loses money. For example, P1 reveals his share, but P2 does not. Then only P2 learns the reconstruction result, but he loses Q dollars because P1 gets Q dollars from P2 by revealing T1, and P2 cannot get back the money. Thus, honest P1 gets money as a compensation. So this approach seems to achieve fairness. However, it is not true. Suppose that corrupted P2 does not make the transaction, but honest P1 makes. Then honest P1 loses Q dollars from this step. And P1 cannot get back the money because P2 did not make the transaction. This violates the condition that honest parties loses no money, and thus this approach does not achieve fairness. In order to prevent from this abort attack, Bentov and Kumar-san introduced the locking technique. First, P1 makes a transaction like this. This transaction means that P2 must reveal both T1 and T2 in round 4 to receive Q dollars. Then we note that P2 cannot receive money before P1 reveals T1 because this transaction is locked with T1. After that, P2 makes a transaction like this. After making transactions, P1 first reveals T1 and gets Q dollars. After that, P2 reveals T1 and T2 and gets Q dollars. As a result, P2 cannot perform the abort attack. Fair reconstruction is achieved in this case. The general setting is also similar to this mechanism. P2 makes a transaction for P1, and P3 makes it for P2, and P4 makes it for P3. Namely, in order to prevent the abort attack, shares are revealed one by one. Thus, Bentov and Kumar-san fair reconstruction protocol requires ON rounds. Finally, I will present our proposed protocol. In order to improve the round complexity, we improve the fair reconstruction protocol. Our protocol is realized with constant rounds. So, by replacing Bentov and the Commersant protocol with ours, fairness can be achieved with constant rounds and ON broadcasts. However, our protocol has different properties than their protocol in terms of compensation amounts. In secure computation with penalties, it is guaranteed that compensation amounts are the same for all honest parties. In order to improve the round complexity, we introduce a new model called secure computation with non-equivalent penalties that is relaxed to this requirement. In secure computation with non-equivalent penalties, it is guaranteed that compensation amounts are more than a predetermined amount for all honest parties. However, the amounts may vary among the parties. For example, we allow the situation when an adversary steals the output, an honest party gets $40, but another honest party gets $60. We note that the difference between two models is only the compensation amounts, and these models are the same if all parties behave honestly. This is the overviews of Bentov and Commersant fair reconstruction and ours. In Bentov and Commersant protocol, parties reveal their shares one by one, so their protocol requires ON rounds. On the other hand, in our protocol, these n-2 shares are revealed in one round. As a result, our protocol achieves constant rounds. In our fair reconstruction protocol, Pn-1 reveals his share, Tn-1 first, and receives money from each of P1 to Pn-2. After that, P1 to Pn-2 reveals their shares with Tn-1. This phase is using the locking technique to prevent the abort attack, like Bentov and Commersant solution. As a result, in our protocol, n-1 shares are revealed only 2 rounds. If party perform honestly, the final round state becomes like this. Then only Pn does not reveal his share, Tn yet. P1 to Pn-1's wallets have positive amount, and only Pn's wallet has negative amount. In this round, Pn receives money from all of the other parties by revealing all shares, including Tn. If Pn aborts without revealing his share, then every honest party gets money. Thus, this protocol realizes fairness in this case. If an adversary aborts at other than the final rounds, honest party can also get money, and honest parties never loses money. Thus, our protocol achieves fair reconstruction. Of course, we need more rigorous discussions, such as how much money should be applied to each transaction, but I omit them here. Please refer to our paper for the detail. This is the summary. In secure computation with penalties, there is an open problem. Is it possible to design secure computation with penalties that needs only constant rounds and ON broadcasts? In this work, in a slightly relaxed setting, we gave a positive answer to this question. In other words, we proposed a protocol with constant rounds and ON broadcasts for secure computation with non-equivalent penalties. Thank you.
Thank you, Takeshi. We had 3 presentations in streams of research that are very well established in computer science, but I think are of interest to economists in the sense that they they give us an understanding of mechanisms to improve the management of the technology in the case of Vitai's papers, and also of how incentives can be used to promote appropriate use of cryptographic technologies in the case of the second paper, or to promote secure computation in a distributed way, which basically means which may be very important in applications like smart contracts and so on. So we have about 5 minutes left, and I want to take the time to open it for questions. And then we're going to have breakout sessions where you can ask more questions of the authors. So.
Sarah, you can just unmute yourself.
Okay, so my question is to Sanas about the spamming. So spamming is actually something that we see a lot on the different blockchains and different protocols. And it seems like it is actually coming many times from, so it might be the same sender, but one sender that is using different wallets. So in a way, when you're blocking a wallet, I'm just not sure whether this is going to be a solution, given the fact that you can just kind of like, use multiple wallets in order to spam the network. And then I also wanted to know whether you have some kind of like, empirical data or empirical evidence of spamming on the different blockchains, and specifically, why do we see traders or the incentives behind spamming in terms of it seems like, so I've been actually looking at some of this data, and it seems like spamming is you see spamming in very specific points of time where you're trying to maybe stop others from front running a specific transaction or something like that. So I want to know whether you have more evidence or more thoughts about this.
Okay, thank you for your question. Well, regarding your second question, to be honest, we don't have like empirical data right now, or I don't have like in my mind, but I can give you an example. Let's say, I think you mentioned it before about, let's say, in an Ethereum blockchain, people may want to like sabotage like the activity of a validator. So kind of spamming and flooding the system is one way to do that. If you can identify them, and if you can like launch the DDoS attack. But regarding your first question, sorry, I forgot your first question. Can you say it again? I'm sorry for that.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about blocking. If you're blocking one wallet, and I can just keep. So from what I've seen, it seems like traders are using different wallets for trading and for the spamming. So if you're blocking their spamming wallet, then you're not necessarily kind of like solving the problem.
Yeah, that's true. But the thing is that it's going to be costly to create a new wallet or a new account. It's not for free, because you have to lock fund. You have to stake for that. So it means that you're disincentivizing the spamming activity. It's not for free for you just to spam it and then you have your wallet kind of blocked. So we hope that this is going to prevent a creation of multiple accounts by the spammer.
Which kind of like really depends on what you're gaining from the spamming, right? So now with MEV and everything, if your gain from, front running is so large, then it might be worthwhile the cost of being blocked later on. So kind of like, I totally see what you're saying, and it makes a lot of sense. But I think that really thinking about it practically, there has to be kind of like, I guess, a large enough punishment that going to kind of like give you the right incentives to stop that. And I guess my other question is that, so you kind of like you see spamming off chain and of transactions that actually did not get on the chain, and spamming of transactions that that ended up on the chain. And I guess I wonder whether you also have any thoughts about that.
Sorry, I'm not sure if I understood your question correctly. Can you elaborate on it?
So, so from what I've seen spamming where sometimes your spamming transactions actually end up not. So in a way, you're choosing like a low fee or something like that. So your spam transactions actually do not get on chain. So they're not written on the chain, but they are still propagated. So that means that you're still slowing down the network, but not really. But in a way, they do not end up on the chain. So I guess I wonder whether kind of like your solution actually account for practices like that or not.
Well, so let me tell you in this way. I mean, when you send a transaction and if it is identified as a spam, it's not going to reach the entire network, because the very first peer, like let's say the validator that finds it as a spam, it's going to block it. And it's going to happen for all the other participants. They can identify you as a spam. I mean, that transaction as a spam transaction. So I would say it's not going to appear on chain to the best of my knowledge. So I hope that it answers your question.
Yeah, so I guess my next question, and we can do that in the breakout room, is how do you define, or how can you really identify that this is a spam transaction?
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned in the slides, there is this component of nullifier that must be attached to the transaction. And by the way, I need to clarify one thing. Our protocol is not just, specific to the blockchain transactions. It's for any general messaging system that this communication is needed. So, but because you made this example of transactions, so I mean, if we are going to deploy the solution for transactions, then it's going to be like that. Then you have to attach these nullifiers to your message. And so this nullifier will kind of allow the participants to spot whether you have violated the messaging rate and whether that message should be dropped or should be relayed and considered valid. So the nullifier indeed is the key here.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question before we go into the breakout rooms.
I have a question about the wallet design. In the presentation, you said that the wallets can be described as a monotone function, such that some qualifying subsets of keys are got, we can access the wallet. If the function is symmetric, I know that this can be implemented by the error correction code. But I am wondering that for arbitrary, especially a symmetric function, I wonder how these wallets can be actually implemented.
So it's not necessarily symmetric, because the optimal, if the keys fault probabilities are different, then you'd want an asymmetric wallet, and you'd have to explicitly enumerate all the possibilities. Does this make sense?
I mean that if we, for any given function for the wallets, how can we actually design the algorithm or some system to implement this function, so that the wallet can be accessed if and only if the result is 1?
So for the implementation, we can just explicitly specify the Boolean function. We require specific combinations of keys that would result in successful authentication.
Okay, thank you. I think we can explore this in more depth in the breakout rooms. So let me turn it back to Hannah, and she can